I don't believe in writing themes. My book is about love. It's about what it might be, and probably is. And in fact, it's probably just chock full of good themes. But the themes, for my writing anyway, just happen. It's a cohesive collection of themes, character, story that all work together. But it isn't necessarily something I thought, this is a good moment for a long aria on, I don't know, maternal love or whatever it might be.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Writers Drinking Whiskey, your literary happy hour, the show that even Free Willy leaps from the ocean and cheers and asks for a cocktail. I am your host, William R. Hincy, who does serve orcas. And joining me today, I'm really honored and pleased to have author Diane Hammond. Diane, welcome to the bar.
Nice to be with you.
Yeah, I'm so happy this happened. The backstory here, just for the audience, is that you mentioned it kind of in the pregame here, but we were going on 3 days. You were without power, so I thought this wasn't happening. So I'm like, I'll go run some errands and things. And then I saw your message like, oh, the power's back on. I'm like, okay. Let me get back to show mode, because usually I just have I look like the Unabomber outside of the show. I was like bearded and wandering about with a hoodie and things. But
we live in rural Michigan, sort of northern lower Michigan or southern upper Michigan, and not the UP, but the mitten part of the state. And when we get bad thunderstorms, which we did, and we lose power, it's days. So, and it's just so discouraging because you never know. And I had you, and I had put you off once before because of a death in the family, and it was like, oh, we're first here. So I'm very glad to be sitting here looking at your lovely face.
Oh, very good. I am too. The feeling's certainly mutual. So this will be a really interesting question, because I like to start with where you are in the world, which you already mentioned that. But the second part of the question is, I like to ask, where's the best place to get a drink there? And since it's a big rural area, it's always interesting what people come up with. So what do you have?
There's a biker bar not very far from here, but we have not been inside, but we've been invited. So I assume that's probably a good place to get a drink, though I'm not a biker. The nearest town is about 17 miles away, and there are bars there, but I've not been to one. We are reclusive because we moved to this area without knowing a soul. We moved from St. Paul, Minnesota 3 years ago. We knew nobody. So we tended not to go out much because we didn't know anybody to share with. But we have now found a very good pizza parlor in town. So I would say that's where we've had our drinks, and they've been few, but good. So my answer.
Very good, very good. Pizza parlors are good. Nothing wrong with some pizza and a drink. One of the things that I find terribly distressing about getting older is that, because I used to drink like a fish, right? And so then I came up, I had the gout. So I can't. Oh, yeah. So like the gout gets me and I limp around, right? So you have to cut back, not just the drinking, but the red meat and the shellfish. And the red meat wasn't so hard. I love a good steak every now and then, but I'm good with every now and then. The shellfish was terrible for me because like shrimp and crab and all of that, I could eat that twice a week if my wife would let me. But and then it got to be where pizza, I think it's like the sauce that's like too acidic. Right. So if I eat too much, like marinara sauce in general, it could be spaghetti, anything like that, that'll upset my stomach. I usually have a steel trap for a stomach, but that destroys the trap. So I still love the pizza, and I'll still have a couple of slices, but it's one of those now. It's like, okay, I can't go nuts. I can't have after having cocktails and have 5-6 slices. I'm going to be hurting really bad in the middle of the night here. So
well, gout is, in the big toe part of gout anyway, is supposed to be incredibly painful, can't walk painful. Yeah.
Sure. The toe is the most painful as it's hit my knees at times. And I can't sleep. I can't, there's just no way you can sit. That's not I've heard people describe it as too, well, the way I've heard people describe it is getting 1,000 needle points, in just your joint.
Right.
to me, it almost feels more like, especially the knees, like if you just have like shards of glass there, and everywhere you went, it was just that like you stepped on like a shard of glass every which way. So yeah, it's not fun. I've been very good actually. I've been drinking lots of water and exercising. So the last like few years, I've managed a lot better. But it's
So
not
how
fun.
long does an attack last? Days, weeks?
Usually days. I had times in the past where it was really unmanaged, and it would it would go. It would be about a week or two. There was a stretch where I think it did some permanent damage. In fact, my gout doctor actually, I was talking to her about it one day, and she was like, "Oh, I want to do some more X-rays on it because it doesn't sound right." Because my left knee, there was a time for like a couple months I just could not walk. I mean, I could limp,
Right.
but I couldn't walk normally. And I ended up going to physical therapy. And when I got to physical therapy, the therapist, like she tried to bend my knee, and I forget what she said. It was like, hey, I got like 18 degrees or something. It's like it was worse than people that just had a knee replacement.
Wow.
And
Wow.
she didn't tell me that at the time. She just went, "What's your goal here?" And I was like, "I just want to be able to like kind of run around with the grandkids and like play with the kids, kind of just hike, kind of just like not trying to be in a sport or something, just like want to like live." And she told me after, she was like, "I didn't think that was going to happen because
Wow.
like, your knee would not flex, but it was actually fairly, once we started doing it and kind of working it, I got flexibility back, and I'm mostly good. I go ride my bike and things all the time and things now, but occasionally that knee would just flare up on me. And when I was telling her about it, she was like, "Oh, I don't think that's always gout. There might be. I think sometimes what can happen is it can kind of erode it anyways to where you get different types of arthritis." So
Yeah.
yeah.
I have psoriatic arthritis, which I was just diagnosed with not too long ago, and that knee thing is awful. It's not mine is nothing like what you're describing, but it's enough to keep you awake. And you turn one way, you turn the other way, you turn back. You can't figure it out. There's nothing you can do that's going to improve your circumstances, and you've got hours to go, and you know it.
Yeah, that's what's weird about the knee. It's like you would think, like, oh, just roll over and it'll be still in this position. Like, knee.
It's a very unforgiving joint. I have a dog down here, so when I'm looking down, I'm looking at the dog.
No worries.
Forgive me. Okay, she's leaving. I disappointed her. She's leaving.
I saw her. She'll wander out there for a second. That's cute. Awesome. So, I wonder then that to kind of get started here properly, besides like our arthritis talk, which my problem is I get too curious and too talkative about everything. I was like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I don't know. I'm just curious about this now." We were in London like right after all the Brexit. I think it was maybe the first time. I know they did a second vote. It's been so long, and then COVID kind of throws things off. But it was a little bit before COVID when we were there. And I was asking everyone about it. She's like, "What are you doing? Why do you ask them?" I'm like, "I'm just curious what they think about like all of this, like because you hear about on the news, right? But you don't know what random people are like, like feel. It's like, stop talking about that." I'm like, "But I'm curious. I just want to know, And because I'm an outsider, no one cared. It wasn't like I had a dog in the fight. I was just like, "What do you think? What's happening with this?" And they're like, "Oh," and they would go on, like it was a big deal, right? So they would kind of go on their spiel, and she's like, "How do you do that? You're getting them riled up." I'm like, "No, I'm not. I'm just talking to them."
Yeah. I don't know that I would say I'm shy. I'm not. Well, I guess I'm some version of an introvert shy. I'm definitely an introvert. But one of the best strategies ever is if you don't know what else to say to somebody, ask questions. It's the best. You learn stuff you would never learn if you don't just ask people questions. And if you're uncomfortable, turn the tables, get them to talk about themselves. People love to talk about themselves. So it's a terrific strategy. And you learn all kinds of things that you wouldn't have otherwise. So I'm all in favor of asking those questions. You go ahead.
And so speaking of question, I was wondering then if you could maybe, I like to kind of phrase it as like the author journey. Like maybe you could kind of tell us about kind of where you started off to, leading up to today.
Well, I grew up in New York, and so I was very lucky to live in New York, go to school in Vermont, but lived in Washington, D.C. for a bit. So I was part of that kind of East Coast New Yorker magazine, The Atlantic, that sort of very literary establishment. And I learned to write. Well, I started writing right out of college. I never could imagine writing a book. And I'm a big reader, family of big readers, always have been. But it always struck me as amazing that people could write books. How do you hold all that in your head? But I was living in Hawaii briefly, and I was really miserable. I mean, I was in the wrong relationship with the wrong person in the wrong place. So, because I'm not very good at arguing, I decided to just write. And so I kind of started writing what turned a short story. It was really bad, but a great way to escape your life and to kind of turn the tables and make something cool out of nothing at all. So I got hooked then. would have been 21 maybe. Was not an English major, was terrified of Shakespeare, never did that academic track at all. I was a history and art history major, but left Hawaii, moved to Washington, D.C., and became part of a writing community there that was very encouraging. And we were all young and very competitive. And there was a writer's center in Glen Echo, Maryland, that was in part of the D.C. metro area. So I joined a writer's group and took a class. That was my only class, in fact. And I don't think I learned very much, except there were other people who were like me, which was a big deal. So ended up winning a contest, not a named one, but a Penn Faulkner seminar kind of thing with Ted Solitaroff, who was an editor then at, I'm going to get this wrong, and it's a tragedy. It might have been Harper Row in those days. At any rate, he was a really big deal. And the event was that he was going to select a short story from everybody who wanted to submit and then workshop it in front of this, 100-person group. So mine was the story that was selected. And he introduced me to an agent. I wasn't ready for an agent. I was writing short stories, not very good ones, but good way to cut your teeth on writing, very unforgiving.
Absolutely.
In a novel, you can screw around all you want because you got plenty of room. You can't do that in a short story. So I was lucky in that as I was learning that format, which still I do badly, I was introduced to Ted Solitaroff and this agent who did not pick me up years later, but that's a whole different story. But at any rate, I kind of got plugged into the East Coast literati in a way, and was lucky enough to write short stories that were critiqued by a wonderful man named Daniel Menaker at the New Yorker. And what a sweetheart. They never bought anything of mine. I doubt I even came close, but he would critique my stuff. So I would get a page, 2 pages back critiquing what I was doing. And there was an editor at The Atlantic who did the same thing. So I was kind of the beneficiary of a real big brain trust, and I count myself very lucky for that. So those were my kind of most formative writing years. And boy, I wanted more than anything to write a book to be published. That was my only goal. Obviously, was not going to be my paying job. I was in PR instead, but anyway, so I ended up selling my first, I don't remember, maybe 6, 7 short stories to, I sold one to Mademoiselle. That's the only one I got really well paid for. But some other Woman's World and a couple of good journals, Yankee Magazine, some other small literary. And then we moved to the wilds of the Oregon coast. And my goal was to not do anything terribly professional, to have an easy job and write. So from that point on, I would have been 24, 25 then, started to work on longer form stuff. And eventually, many years later, ended up writing my first book, which was published could have been 2003, I think. Anyway, it was like winning the lottery. I'm sure you felt the same way when your things began to be published. You just think, God, could I be any luckier than this? I mean, talent plus drive plus luck equals success, and success being a very varied commodity. But that was the beginning of me as a novelist, and I've had 5 books published since then, 2 with Random House, 3 with HarperCollins. Love my editors. The books, some did better than others, but and my last one came out, it's been a while. I think it was almost 10 years ago now. So
Mhm.
But I write because I love to write. And it's always nice when people read your stuff, but I would write anyway.
Sure.
It gives me joy in a way that nothing else does. I love to make stuff anyway. Let's make something. But to do it out of absolute thin air, to do it with something that doesn't exist at all except as sound waves or lines on a page. What a weird thing to do. You know?
Right,
But there's, that's it. That's your book. It's just,
right.
kind of.
Yeah.
So it's like magic. And I've always been really under the spell of creating stuff from nothing. And
Mhm.
if I can create something with words and you read it and you come away feeling that you've met my characters or you know my setting or any number of things you could think, how cool is that? Nothing exists but those words. Nothing. I don't instruct you on anything. I don't give you hints. So I've never looked back to short story writing. I'm just no damn good at it. I really, it's too spare. It's too unforgiving for me to shine at. But novels have been a wonder, and I'm a literary novelist. I envy genre writers because they have some conventions that they can look to. Not that they're imitative writers, but there are conventions, and it's a shared. But with literary stuff, it's every book is different. Every book is quite different, and there are no conventions. So it's sort of, people say, what kind of things do you write? And I say, well, there's no other bucket for it. So it's called literary fiction, really, just because it's miscellaneous. There's no other commonality in that bucket except to fit into any other kind of genre. So that's me, and I would give it up for the world. Up for the world.
Yeah, sure. Well, it's funny you mentioned that because there is, you mentioned magic, with it, because there is kind of an alchemy, to it. I've always said it's like you have to take. So if you're, and I guess it varies, but kind of at the core at all times, right, is you have this idea. That idea is kind of nebulous and things. You then have to kind of translate that idea into a story that's performed by characters. And then as you're doing all this, you have to hold this world together. That's, even if you're writing this world, it's not exactly this world, unless it's nonfiction, right? But you're a fiction writer, not exactly this world. It's always adjacent in some way, some ways more than others. So now you have to, that's all you start in this, it's like you're that old, thing you see on a show, someone has poles and there's plates and you're dangling all this. And as you do all that, you now have to take all of that and then translate that onto words on a page that hopefully connect with someone 1,000 miles away 3 years from now.
Yeah, and it is magic. It feels like magic. And those days when you almost don't feel like you're writing, you're transcribing. I love that. They don't happen all that often necessarily, but boy, when they do, it's just like you're transported. It's so thrilling. And I'm 68. I've been doing this for 48, 46 years, and it's never gotten old. When things click like that, it's just as exciting and just as magical as the day I started trying to figure it all out. So I think that's an important little bit is magic, magic, magic.
Right. Yeah. Well, and keeping the love of life, alive for it. Right. So I think I think you're a real testament to that. That it's easy to say I'm going to write a book one day, right? And some of those people might write a book one day. Most of them aren't going to write that book one day. That's fine. But it's hard to then go, oh, I'm going to write the next book. I'm going to write the next book. And that's when there's truly something that's, it's like you love it, but then there's also just a compulsion, to it. So my wife noticed fairly early on that I'd get grumpy, especially when I was working full time and I was doing a lot. She noticed I'd get grumpy and I wouldn't even notice. She's like, oh, last time you were writing? And I'm like, it's been a couple of weeks. We it was between the kids, especially because a lot of the youngest kid we have now is in 8th grade. Then we have a daughter that just graduated high school. We have 2 that are adults, and we have 2 grandkids now, one with each. So The rearing, getting the 4 kids around, doing all that, working full-time, commuting, all of that's kind of, back to ways. So I'm lucky enough now to write, essentially every day and do this podcast and everything else.
Yeah.
But it's,
you were going to stop working full-time, right? Have you already?
Yes.
Or it's just coming up? No, you already have.
Yeah. I stopped actually about 2 months ago now. Yeah.
Wow. How does it feel? Are you used to it now enough not to just marvel every morning?
So, it's weird because I am a very compulsive. Mm-hmm. So what the hard part actually wasn't the marveling that I get to do this. The hard part was that I think I got into I need to finish this book today. So, what am I doing? I'm not out like pounding pavement, adding money to the 401k right now. Like, I need to write this book today. And then I was working like incredible hours the first 2 weeks. And it's like, usually I'm like, okay, no, the evening's family time, right. And it was like, I was working on all these hours on, okay, I need to like get back, like what's realistic, what can I get done today? And I'm in kind of the final for the novel I'm working on right now is Pirates of Appalachia. Right. And I'm just doing the last like continuity edit. So pretty easy. Most of the language is pretty, there's a few chapters that are a little rougher that I've stopped and kind of like, cleaned up. Because I'm like you, I started with short stories. In fact, I still write short stories. In some ways I'm a short story writer by heart, but your point of how concise and how like, that each word has to kind of add up to more, right? Like the word needs to count for 10 and, in some ways, I love that. But when you try to do that with a novel, like, and especially with a novel that's 240,000 words at this point, really probably going to get split into 2, is challenging to say the least, not always productive, but I going through that, and then it was like, oh, I need to get. It's like, no, just okay. Let's get through a chapter a day. Let's do do this. We still get the podcast and a lot of the other things going on. So family, so bills, so we got other things that just need to happen. So if that was the struggle for me, was just like, okay, I need to treat this at a corporate career. I managed tons and tons of projects. That was the last thing I was doing, is just helping manage projects at the end. And right. I was like, I need to apply some of that to myself. I need to manage myself here.
we're our own worst boss, though. I mean, we're
exactly
doing that. It's, there was he's thinking about the fact that short stories don't give you the kind of freedom or flexibility, because they really have to be awfully tight to be good anyway. Mm-hmm. And when I wrote a book called Hannah's Dream, and there was a character in it. It was my second novel. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I love this character. He was sort of a savant artist on the spectrum, brilliant visual artist, kind of a primitive painter, but with a sophisticated mind. But he was really weird, and I loved him. Johnson, my favorite character in the entire book. He did absolutely nothing to move the story forward. Not a damn thing. But it was a novel, and I got away with leaving him in, and my editor was kind and said, no, he's a minor character, and he's cute, and people will enjoy him. But I thought I'd never get away with doing this in a short story. Never. I broke a rule. It doesn't really accomplish much, except I was just indulging myself. And he's still one of my very favorite characters I've ever created. So
yeah, that's awesome. Well, I think it's funny because I think a lot when we talk about writing, especially with with doing the show and with the open bar episodes and all of this now, is that a lot of times there's just that the modern the current zeitgeist to it, right? It's like, okay, everything in a story has to be moving it forward or something, right? But you go back and read older stories that were wildly successful, and you read them now and still enjoy them. You can actually find lots of cases where there's characters that didn't necessarily move it forward. Yeah. I think there's in Lord of the Rings, there's like and I read it a long time ago, but I know I've heard a lot of people talk about there's a character like Tom Bombadil And people go, what is he doing in the book? He makes no sense, you know? And so, but he makes no sense in that conception that, oh, he's not moving it forward. But sometimes like it's maybe there's theme, maybe there's just the journey of it. Sometimes you go on a road trip and there's that random person that did not move you forward, didn't help you, get to the next destination, but enlivened the moment, enlivened, the thing. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and I'm a pantser. I don't know about you, but I don't plot worth a damn. I never have. I mean, it's a real weakness of mine. I'm totally character driven, and I generally have no idea what I'm doing. I mean, I know the end of a book, and I know where I'm starting. How I get there is anybody's guess. And so these things, just these characters, these situations, just pop up, and. Yeah, I mean, it's a process thing for me anyway, because I'm literary. I just sort of figure it out as I go along or not. I mean, I do a fair amount of ripping and tearing, but it's if you don't allow that kind of organic development to happen of the story, the characters, whatever it might be, I think you have a much less lively book, a less alive book. It's when that magic happens and you just go, wow, I'll connect these things. I didn't know that they had a common, but yeah, they do. And so, I know what to do now. Or I know there's nothing to do now. And this got to work out. But chances are pretty good they do work out. There is a kind of internal logic to the creative process, even if you don't think you know what you're doing. And certainly I don't. But there's a kind of subconscious commonality to any given book or story where if you look back on it, I don't believe in writing themes. My book is about love, it's about what it might be and probably is. And in fact, it's probably just chock full of good themes. But the themes, for my writing anyway, just happen. It's a cohesive collection of themes, character, story that all work together, but it isn't necessarily something I thought, this is a good moment for a long aria on, I don't know, maternal love or whatever it might be. It just you just open up and say, let's just see what's going to happen today. And that's my overwork. I'm thinking about you and trying to pace yourself and I tend to want that magic every day. I want that stuff to happen every day, and it doesn't. It just doesn't. It doesn't work that way. But so you kind of toggle between your editorial self trying to get under control this mess that you've created, and then the other much more fun part, which is the writing part, where you just go into receiving mode and you kind of just see what happens, and sometimes nothing does, and sometimes wonderful things do. So I think that might offset my pantsing.
Yeah, I know you always have to. I always say I think way too much the last. I would even go probably at least 20 years, but was made of your weaknesses. Like, how do you improve your weaknesses? I'm like, screw your weaknesses. What are your strengths? Let's work on that, and then just mitigate the weaknesses. Like you might at some point turn a weakness into a strength, but you know what? You might turn that strength that's already there into something great. That's probably what you should be focused on. But I like that you said that, because it really reminds me of I'll use the analogy of laying brick, right? There's some days it's you get to imagine what the castle's going to look like. And, think of all these things, the lore and whatever it might be, right? If you're a fantasy writer, I guess, and that construction. But there's other days where you've got to lay the brick now for that castle. And there's sometimes you got to just get there. You just got to lay the brick. You've got to do the work. It's not going to be the mat. And there's a third day where you have to be the inspector that comes in and goes, this isn't the code. This might fall over here. And and that inspector that might be sometimes where you go, oh wait, but this makes perfect sense. Right. If we tied this in, this would be something we didn't anticipate starting, but makes the whole thing better. So it's an interesting gig, writing for certain.
And if you try to tell a non-writer about any of this stuff, they just look at you. Not always just like crazy. I mean, most of them, but they just look at you in wonder, because there isn't anything that I've ever figured out that's analogous. I mean, knitting, I'm a knitter, and so knitting a beautiful sweater, that kind of comes close, but you're following a pattern. You're not, and you've got yarn, and you've got needles in a book, and other people who can step in and help. One of the things about writing on a bad day, and God knows there are a lot of them, is you get to a point where you would love to say, I'm stuck. I don't know what I'm doing. Would you let me give it to you and see what you can do? But not as an editor, as a writer, well, you don't get to do that. No one is going to save you. Your editor will improve you, but really, you're on your own. I mean, it all comes out of your head and your history, and so those bad days when you're stuck, you got nobody. You just gotta reach out.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you sink or swim, and you gotta just find your way through. I mean, I guess going back to the working full time, what I've tried to be mindful of is, no, I can't just make this like a vanity thing. Like, I need to work through, and you work through that. There's also, like, if you have a regular kind of 9-to-5 job, I was always for, and I was a director for a long time, so lots of people that worked under me, but I was always perfectly okay with people needing a mental health day, right? Like, sometimes you need a step away, but you need to be adult enough to know, okay, I need to press through, I need to get stuff down. Other times, maybe I just need a day away. I need to go to the zoo, whatever. I just need to get away and let the, recharge a little bit here.
Well, what do you do when you finished a story or finished a book? Do you immediately go to your next one, or do you take
You
go right on to the next one, and it's in your head and you're ready?
I have so many ideas. I know I'll never write them. So I know I won't actually write all of them. So it ends up being like, right now, I've actually started the next novel because the editing I'm doing now for Pirates is fairly simple. I'm just making sure, like, hey, this happens, the order's there, right? A little touch-ups here or there. But so I've already started the next book, and the real question was, which one did I want to write? So yeah, I jumped right out. But the thing is, I'm really excited now about that. So part of the hard part too is that the Pirates is all laying brick at this point. It was a complete passion project. It's so much fun writing it, but really it's all laying brick. I'm the health inspector actually at this point. I'm not even laying brick. I'm just the health inspector going, all these writers, aren't up to code, and we're going through, and I'm giving myself hell. But yeah, no, I like to jump right back in and get to the next thing. And the next thing is completely, what's funny is I wrote short stories. The one that's usually behind me is a collection called Without Expiration. That it was written over many years, different short stories that were published, various places. But that was very dark at times. Very human. There's a few little flourishes in there that there's some absurd comedy or a satire in there. But it's very gritty, very human. And then, I write Pirates, which is an epic absurdist satire with these people from West Virginia sailing down to sack a future Pittsburgh, and it's kind of set in this quasi future that it happens after a thing I call the Trumpocalypse. And it's so it has all this lore and all this history, all these things and these things. So it's utterly, completely different, and so the next book is completely different again. But that's what I love about kind of being on that literary spectrum. And I think my family probably thinks I'm just on all kinds of different spectrums as well, but I love that ability. I don't like to be pigeonholed. I would, I would love to write all kinds of genres. I wouldn't mind. I have ideas I fit in there, but I would always preface it as it's a literary piece, so that then I just figure out kind of what works. And okay, there's a murder, there's some kind of a ticking clock. Maybe it fits on that thriller, shelf over there. But this also, I'm not worried about any conventions or anything that kind of came before it, which is, I think that exploration. I like how you said it. Like that you don't know what you're doing, just figure it out. I think that's the that's the excitement to me.
Yeah.
Is I got to figure this out. It's troubling and difficult as all hell, but it's fun.
But it's a discovery. You never know. So, I love that part. For me, though, I wish that I don't have a gazillion ideas. I have some what ifs, and that's usually where I start. But there aren't that many what ifs that I think I can actually build on, that are substantial enough to make a book. So I tend to go into grief mode when I finish a book, because it takes me, I don't know how, well, your book took you almost, this last one, wasn't it like 10 years? It's
been over. Yeah. Pirates has been, I keep trying to remember the date I started, but from the time I first started writing that to, you can count now. I wouldn't even, I consider it done. What I'm doing now is more like that I'm anal retentive. I can send it off to a publisher now if I wanted, but, I think it was close to 15. And I wrote things in between, did things, but and a lot of that was that life I mentioned before, to where this wasn't daily work, but it's been daily work. 3 years, 4 years. So that's been,
And when
it was a lot of time to think of other ideas.
No kidding. I mean, but I've got one that I just finished that took 8 years off and on. Same thing. I didn't work on it continuously, but anyway, when you leave your characters that long, I go into mourning at the end of it. I miss them. I feel responsible for them, but I'm done. I mean, they're kind of on their own, and I've done the best job I can for them, but they're out of there. And I miss that. I really miss that. So I often will take a break. Like right now, I'm teaching myself historical sewing techniques. Go figure out. But I need to use a different part of my brain and kind of recover and stop missing my characters, or write a sequel, depending. I'm not sure which way I'll go, but it's I can't go right from one group of characters to discovering another group. I wish I could do that. It would be lovely, but I always have these kind of staggy downtimes in between.
Right. Sure. Yeah. No, as you said that, it reminded me of, and I think I've used the analogy before, but it's almost like when your kids kind of move out of the house, when you're down there, it's just like, they're still around, but then, they don't need you like they did, like in any capacity. My wife joked, because right when we're blended. So the older two were my previous relationship. Youngest daughter was my wife when she was married before, and then our son is ours. So when the older two, Rhiannon and Cassie, were moving out of the house and things, before they had kids, but they were on Rhiannon had moved out, and Cassie was getting to that point. And then I suddenly wanted to get like a new dog. That's when we get the 2 chocolate labs. We get Pappuccino and Cappuccino. And she's like, you just replace your 2 daughters with 2 Labrador retrievers over there, right? And my only defense to that is that I only planned on getting 1 dog. And then when we took the smaller kids and all the dogs where they were puppy piling, and then Michaela and William pulled the dogs, like, can we keep them? And I was like, yeah, Mom, can we keep them? No. So
and she was a softie and said yes.
Yeah, So I mean, I'm the one that, actually my son now is really responsible with the dogs. He actually helps take care of them quite a bit, but it was really just more job for me until the last few years when he was old enough to manage them. But yeah, so they like hang out with me, keep me company the whole time. And now it's like I have way more attention than I want. I'm like, you know what? I could, maybe you guys can go outside for 5 minutes. You have to be next to me, nudging me,
Mine, one that's constantly mind melding for something new to eat or to do. Wait, go find something else to do. Leave me alone.
All right. Awesome. So I do want to touch, because then I mentioned beforehand. So we had looked at your bio and things. So I thought there's a few interesting things that maybe we could touch on. Sure. One was, I know you mentioned the first book I think you wrote when you were in Oregon, or it's set in Oregon at minimally. Yeah. And so I guess what I wanted to ask, right? Because you had mentioned, so you're in Hawaii, things aren't working out, and then you end up going to Oregon, which is funny because both, like, depending, I guess, where you are in Oregon, but both next to the ocean, but very different, like, climates and atmospheres, right? The same ocean, but worlds apart.
Yeah.
I wonder how you grew as an artist and as a person, during that time in Oregon.
I loved Oregon. I lived in the Pacific Northwest, all over the place. I mean, not just in Oregon, but we moved away for work for my husband. But the Pacific Northwest in general, and Oregon in particular, are incredibly supportive of writers. And they also, I haven't lived there now for, it's been 12 years. And I'm not sure if it's still true, but it used to be a wonderful climate for indie bookstores. And, and they were fabulous booksellers who were very supportive of literary writing, to the point of hand selling your things if they liked them enough. And so I had so much support from people I knew throughout the Pacific Northwest. And, I did library talks and all kinds of things there that I loved the writing, but the public part of it was scary. So partly my growth wasn't just as a writer, but moving into the persona of being a writer publicly.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And, and you really ought to act like you know what you're doing. Very often I was honest and would talk to people about, the process and how strange it is and how uncontrollable it often is and that sort of thing. But I've never met a group geographically of people more interested in writing as well as reading. And so it was a great springboard. I mean, I felt like I had lots of balloons under me, kind of lifting me up and
sure.
And I missed it. When we left the Northwest 12 years ago, we went to St. Paul, Minnesota, and now we're here in Michigan. And I still consider myself an Oregonian first, a Northwest resident second, and then a citizen of the rest of the world. But I can't think of a better place to learn to write, to really settle down and master the craft. Once I knew I was ambitious and I knew that I had a certain amount of ability, but, the craft end of things is so complicated and it takes so much that I believe nobody can teach you. They can help you a little, but basically you've got to figure it out yourself, and you've got to figure out your own voice and your own way of telling a story and creating characters. And there's no one, like we were saying earlier, there's nobody who can do it but you. And so to develop that kind of confidence and to have the flexibility to stretch in what I was writing about was really a godsend. And I was working full time, same as you. My daughter was a young teenager. At one point, we moved to LA so she could act professionally. I mean, we were always doing other things, but the writing you always find the time. It could be an hour, it could be two a day. But, and so I was writing continuously the whole time. Well, I always am, except for these brief breaks of mine, but it was a terrific, and the writers that I met in the Northwest were very supportive of one another too. It was a pretty tight community. So,
yeah, that sounds lovely. I often think about that, is how it's so hard once things are lost as a society, right, to kind of get them back. And I often think, like, because part of my mission with this show is to try to build a community, around it and things. Because then you see all these podcasts and these things. I've been on a few. Part of the reason I did it is I've been on a few, and they were fine. They were what they were, but it felt, I mentioned, I always pull back the curtain because there's really no behind the scenes, right? Just like, it's just me. There's no awe. Like, don't look at the man behind the curtain. I'm just out here talking, right? But so much writing can be very isolated, right? You're doing it on your own and things. So you can kind of be on your island. And then when writers go to try to sell, they're going to go sell their book now. Now kind of hawking this book, often in awkward ways because we're not the best marketers generally, you know.
No, we're not.
And so then you go on a podcast and you're just trying to sell a book, you know. And I had done just not a whole lot. I just done a few. And I was just like, you know what? But what about when I go out with like, you know, go to a conference and me and the writers are talking at the bar after, or you go do this. I'm like, yeah, the conversations are so great. And that's so interesting. And that actually, you feel good. You feel edified. Like you feel like the community's built, and then it's lost, you know, so quickly. And I didn't see anything really out there trying to do that. So I was like, oh, doing the show. It's like, you know, that'd be fun. What if I could recreate those conversations?
Yeah.
You know, like.
It's very important, and it is a lonely business, and nobody can do it for you. All the things that we've been talking about, but we face similar problems or similar challenges, if you want to be politically problems. I mean, we get stuck, we get lost, we get frustrated, we get to doubt our own abilities, and all of those things in a way that it's very hard for any normal person to relate to. Never mind help you with. I mean, there's just no way. And everybody's had probably everybody's had that painful experience where you get to a friend, a lay person, your husband, wife, and you say, okay, well, here's the deal. Here's what I've got, and it's wrong. And I'm trying to figure out, and then they try to tell you how to fix it. Have you had that? Oh, but if or what about this? And you're just going, oh God, it's just awful. But a writer would probably not do that, or not do it in the same sort of clueless, affable, but oblivious kind of way. And just being able to sit down with another writer and say, this has been the worst writing week ever. I'm never going to finish this book. And they go, yeah, I've been there too. I mean, it's going to end. Just wait it out. It will. And it does. So I applaud you, and I hope you're wildly successful, because we do, you know, with social media and with all of the electronic ways of staying in touch, it still doesn't necessarily mean that you have a community if they're not people who are also trying that same crazy thing that you do alone in the dark with your computer.
Well, and it's hard to build real connections, like, you know, 170 characters or whatever it might be right at a time, or here's my picture of dinner. I shouldn't. I hate social media so much. Like that now I'm really releasing the curtain. Like, oh my God, of all things that I find utterly useless and boring is social media. And this, I get YouTube qualifies as social media. That's the prominent place for the thing. I'm also going to spend, you know, we're going to have someone on, and I'm going to sit and actually talk to you and have a real conversation with. That feels very different than, than the rest of it. So that's my caveat that makes me feel better. But otherwise, I'm like, social media, I'm like, I did not go on it. In fact, actually, at one point, I realized I hadn't been on in 2 months. I had even forget, like, I usually try to schedule the announcement for the shows and things, and I'll try to go on, just post little clips from the shows. And so I spend 20 minutes, you know, maybe doing it. But I even forgot that. I'm like, oh, I haven't been on. I'm like, oh man, I'm a little past due. I need to get on and do it. I'm like, it's like, it tells you the date. I'm like, I haven't been on for 2 months. I'm like, didn't miss it.
Yeah, I actually don't even have a website anymore. I really need to get going again, but because it's been a long time since my last book came out, I got lazy. And my website is built on a different platform, so I can't work with my old one, and I just keep putting it up. Self-promotion sucks. I mean, the thought of having to actually try to do TikTok. Somebody was talking to me about, well, here's what you should be doing, and no doubt they're right, but I can't imagine bringing myself to do it. And yet, that's self-defeating, because I'm trolling for a new agent right now. I fired my old one quite a while ago, and it's really hard. It's really hard. And even with all of the books that I've got published, I'm astonished at how hard it is. And a lot of them want to know what platform you have for promoting yourself. How many followers do you have? What do you do? How often do you post? It's like, wow. To me, that has nothing whatsoever to do with why I write or what I write. So yeah, it's all I can do to get on Facebook. And I don't talk about writing. I talk about my dogs. But it's self-defeating. I mean, there is a reason promotionally why we should all be hawking ourselves all the time. But We're no damn good at it, most of us. That's not the quality that makes us good writers. At least nobody I know. It's important if you want to sell any books, but it's very hard. Well, you can see I haven't risen to the challenge yet. I'm doing historical sewing instead and enjoying myself tremendously and putting on it for one more day. Building a new website and, trying to get out there more than I have in a while.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to find what's the best path for you. And so I think, getting to the show here, right? This was kind of the best path for me. This made a lot of sense. It's never like a work, it's like we're reschedule. I'm like, it's a labor of fun. Don't worry about it. If we need to reschedule, we reschedule. Like, we'll talk later. And I mean that, like, I don't stress about, about it. I do prepare, I do get things ready. But if I prepare and we don't record right now, then I have a drink prepared and I drink it. And then, next time I come on and it takes me 20 minutes to throw, because this is the actual home bar and I have all my equipment here. And no one, like my wife doesn't even notice. She comes over here occasionally and people come over. I clear it so we can hang out. But I like it because I have all my cool little gadgets and things. I like it to be clean. So when I look over, I can see I have my writers drinking whiskey. I should take it. I'll try to take a picture and include it with the show. I have a whiskey barrel now that has writers drinking whiskey burned into it that I can age my own whiskey in. So that's I like the aesthetic of it. So I clean it up. But I think if you find things that work for you, because I've heard it called the age of authenticity. Social media is very much actually about authenticity, not so much trying to sell things.
Right.
So if it's your dogs, it's finding that path that actually makes sense for you.
Right.
And then, working that into what, your books and things that you're trying to actually get out there. And but not trying to make it, I'm trying to sell you a book. It's more like I'm trying to connect with you. This medium here, this book. I think you'll find something out of. I work very hard on, and hopefully this will work out. So they just go on and post 12 times a day. Some people it might work for. I think if for the every 1 million person that works for, it's not working for the rest. So
you have to have something to say. I don't have that much to say in the course of a normal day. I once had there's a part segue. I'm partial, not a total non sequitur, but in Oregon, I got a call one day from a high school and it was a career counselor. And she said, Diane, I've got a student who'd like to shadow you for the day. And I started laughing and I said, what do they think I do? I just sit on my computer. And if it's a good day, I type. And if it's a bad day, I eat. There's nothing to shadow. There's nothing to see. I would be delighted to talk to this person. But as far as shadowing me goes, it's going to be a very long day of absolutely nothing going on that's visible anyway.
Very good. It's funny. I had on in one of the episodes, any of you saw it, but if not, and for anyone watching that hasn't, Michael Branch was the author on it. It's very funny because he has a clip, and I think I included a link to it on the show. But what his last book, they did a little spoof of a writer talk, and the guy goes up, and he's in this casino, with no light in there, and all this booze, and he's trying to talk about the writing process, and he just wants to kill the kid that's on, and he's a humorist. It's tongue in cheek. It's for fun, but. So I saw that, and he didn't know I saw it beforehand. So, but I'm like, okay, so I want to talk to you about the writing process. But he was talking about, he's like, and he didn't, doesn't give out names when he did it, but he's like, I know one writer. He's like, and just was really good, really, had a lot of success. He's like, yeah, first thing I do is I attach my seatbelt. It's like, what seatbelt? He's like, well, I have to have a seatbelt on my chair, or else I'll get up and I won't get any writing done. He's like, okay. So you have a seatbelt. He's like, and then I get my poking stick. He's like, poking stick? He's like, yeah, because I have my seatbelt, now I'm on my chair, I can't reach my corkboard where I keep my ideas, so I need my poking stick. But that would be a fun person to shadow. I would like to see that process. Come
on, well, we all do have our quirks, that's for sure. I went through a bag of bubble gum once. like a big commercial so double bubble.
Sure. Yeah.
You just get into these kind of loops of things that you seem to need in order to move yourself ahead. And bubblegum is my dentist wasn't pleased with me at all, but there are things that we do, and you can either justify it or go, who cares? It's what I need to do. So bubble wrap. I once sent my husband out for a roll of bubble wrap, because
I remember bubble wrap. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And so I wouldn't eat because things like oyster crackers, bland stuff you can just pop, totally ruin me if it's a bad writing day. But bubble wrap, no calories, and you can pop it, and it gives you some nervous energy. So I did bubble wrap. That was better than double bubble gum.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So I'm wondering, so actually it's funny, I usually don't ask this question, but I think it's apropos to this moment. I joke on the show now with the name called Writers Drinking Whiskey. I'm ethically mandated to talk, some writing here. What is your writing process like? Like kind of including like there's the drafting process, but then there's the actual getting to the desk and, the seatbelt kind of aspect of it. What is yours like?
Better in the morning. The house that we're living in now is on a river. We're up above a river. And so on good weather days, the best place to write for me is out on the deck with my laptop. It's quiet. There's nobody around. We're very remote. So, and my mind is clear enough that I can really kind of get in touch with what I'm thinking, which in a noisy or literally and figuratively speaking, both, I can't hear myself. But so the morning, I tend to be much more lucid, writerly anyway. And because I don't, like I said, I pants. I'm a seat of the pants plotter. I don't plot. I just hope to God that it comes along with the characters and they do that work for me, and they generally do. I'm a fierce drafter. I write cleanly. I write in hunks, though. So it's like if I sit down and I have a scene in mind or one just pops in, I'll write that scene or I'll write that bit of dialogue without any narrative tissue, just to capture it. And that's when the cool stuff for me happens. Just start a conversation and see where we go. And the characters develop for me through dialogue very easily. That comes easily to me. And so I'll have all these sort of blocks of stuff, and then eventually I have to get the narrative tissue together. And it's hard. I mean, because I don't tend to think continuously. I think in these rich moments between characters and what it might mean story-wise. So I'm forever writing this stuff going, okay. And then trying to piece it together and make a cohesive story, a tale. And my first drafts are very clean. By the time I get to the end of a book, even if it's just to get that last sentence down, they're usually editorially pretty clean. It doesn't mean that they're well conceived, but the writing part of it is clean. Then I have to go back and figure out what I was actually trying to talk about, or if it all does fit together. And I have things like how to make time pass and getting my points of view buckled down. And some of the technical stuff that I don't want to deal with in the beginning, then I'll have to actually control. But chaos is more fruitful for me than planning. And I really envy people who plan because they know what's coming. I haven't a clue, but it's just the way it works. I mean, every one of us doesn't choose our process. I think we develop it as we can. But
well, and it has to fit your brain, right? I don't know. I feel like now it's weird. People are like get very materialistic, and they're like, it's just your brain and subconscious. I think there's soul and all kinds of things that go into it. But I think for your process, very much right. Like you were talking about the subconscious. I think that your conscious is way more powerful than your conscious mind. So it's lots of times afterwards you could analyze it with the conscious mind and get it, but
But
you
that's
do yourself a disservice not letting the subconscious kind of have its reign.
exactly. And that's exactly what I was talking about, where there you may have feelings that you're working with, but you don't do it consciously. I don't.
Mhm.
It's like, well, that all works together very nice. I mean, there is even over the course of years, you do seem to put together a cohesive set of concerns, problems, character. It's amazing to me that you come out of it in the end, at least hopefully, with something that is not just an interesting story, but there's a certain amount of resonance and depth that goes all the way through. And you couldn't apply that to any other book you've written. I mean, it's unique to that book, but that's the magic. That's when you finish that first draft and you can hopefully get a little distance from it and you go, wow, this is terrible, but it's pretty good. And I think that's where, okay, that's what I was trying to do. That's the good stuff. This is not such good stuff. So then I mean, the first draft is raw material. It's like creating a lump of clay and you sort of slap it around and you get it into some very basic form. And then going back is when you actually take that raw material and discipline it, control it, figure out how the parts connect to each other and that stuff. So, but that's I don't find that nearly as rewarding as that sitting down in the morning with the eagles overhead and, and just writing stuff, just transcribing whatever comes to mind. And I wish it was always like that, though it isn't. But so I'm running after myself. My editorial self generally is running after my writerly self, the biggest challenge. And I think it's true for all writers and young ones especially, is do not let the editor self mess with the writer self. Leave it the hell alone. Get out of the way. Let the writer person work. Then the editor can step in later and fix it all. But not now, just not now, because otherwise it can be so paralyzing. Well, is that sentence really bad? That's a terrible paragraph. That's not probably what I should have done. And pretty soon you can't function. So,
sure.
But for me, and I assume for most of the writers too, learning your own process takes so long to give yourself permission to just do stuff the way you do it. Don't worry about it if it's right or not. You'll figure it out. And the brilliant thing about writing as opposed to performing is there's nothing you can't fix later, at least until it's published. So you don't fall flat on your face in public very often. And I once asked my first editor at Random House what did she feel her role was? Because she was a very high level editor. And she said, well, my job is to stand between you and the critic and make sure that we have addressed everything that a critic might see as a weakness and make sure that what we've done is deliberate. And that's it. The rest is really up to you. So, which I thought was a whole different way of looking at things than what I tended to attribute to editors. And she was quite skillful at it too.
Sure. Yeah. I love that thought of it is that to make sure it's deliberate. Right. Like not to okay, you'll have your criticism. People are going to have, criticisms. Right. But no, but this is deliberate. This happened for a reason.
Yes.
I think that's a brilliant way to look at an editor and to kind of when you're in that editorial space is to, do it. So I love the notion of when you're writing, you got to get it out. Right? You got to get that lump of clay. You got to get, whatever. You got to get materials. Some people can kind of draw out the architecture of it, and then kind of fill it in. That's cool. But, if you can't, then you go the opposite way. And I think there's that trial and error too. What works for you, what doesn't, and the thing I try to tell, especially when I talk with younger writers, is you don't know if a process works for you until you actually give it a chance to work for you. So you kind of go, oh, well, today I'm going to do this thing. Oh, tomorrow I'm doing that thing. It's like, no matter what your process is, you're going to have hard days. So you got to stick through and see what gets you that end product that you want, what gets you that book at the end. And maybe it falls through and it never gets you there and you realize that doesn't work, but you've got to give it a little bit of time to kind of before you realize that's not the right process. And it's not just, we all don't like pain, right? So it's like once it's painful, we have like everything goes, don't do this. Why? This is uncomfortable. Turn away, eat more bubble gum, whatever it is, have more whiskey, like
it's so true. And there have been days I don't drink very much. I like whiskey, actually, though I don't have any with me today. But I now and then, if I'm stuck, more than now and then, I have to admit, I think about, God, it would be nice to drink. Because maybe if I just had a stick drink, it would take me over. Sometimes it's the getting started in the morning. Oh, God. Well, maybe I'll just put my laundry in there. I'll sit down. Or I'm just getting in my own way. And if I just had a good drink, maybe then I would relax enough, because it's all fear-based. It's what if I sit down and I don't have anything to say, or I say it badly, or I do it, what I thought was a great idea falls apart. So to do something that would roll me over the anxiety and let me just get into the writing right away. Sure. It's awfully nice. I never do it. I don't know if it even would work, but the idea of something artificial that would launch me beyond that, oh God, can I do this one more day? Is this going to work one more day? It's so tempting.
Well, I think there's a reason that writers are so known for whiskey on the show, but just drinking in general, and it lowers inhibitions. Yep. And a lot of times it's just that inhibition, like you're should I? Oh, I'm gonna do that. I don't drink when I'm writing. I tried once, and I thought what I was writing was so brilliant. And when I read it the next day, I was like, "This is some just garbage. I'm just not going to drink when I'm." But I think there's the writing, like I'm typing, and then there's the writing when I always say, I do a lot of writing when I'm out on my bike. I don't stop and write anything down. It's just that it's in my head and it's playing. I'll keep having all these ideas I'm formulating. So that's when I think sometimes I have some drinks and things. When I'm trying to put it into language, I know some writers that do. I can't. It turns to gobbledygook, pretty quickly. But
I'm sure I would too. So let me ask you this question, because it's the other piece of it. I always told young writers, listen to yourself think. You're probably writing in your brain all the time. I found out I am wrong. 30% of people, if you believe the statistic, and I do, don't think in words. 30% of us are always doing an internal narration. And we're literally, I think in words sentences. Do you hear yourself thinking in words all the time? Or are you one of the 66%, whatever it is?
It's interesting. It would be interesting to see that with the writers. Like what the percentage would be with writers. Because I do mostly, think. And so there's times, in fact, actually today when I was picking my son up from school, that's when I told you I ran out to do an errand. I ran out to go home. My wife jokes, I love going to Lowe's, like the home place. I went over to Lowe's to do something, and then I was going to go pick my son up. And he has a minimum day on Thursday. So I stop by the coffee place and get him a little sandwich and stuff because he doesn't have lunch. And I've been going there for years and years. So the guy was, talking to me. And I wanted some sandwiches, that were there. So I pointed to one. I'm like, oh, which one? And then I just pointed. I forget what I did. And then Jonathan, the owner of the place, was he's like, yeah, that's great for a writer over there. You got any words you can say? Or just and I'm like, no, I'm not. I've used my words now. I'm there's grunts and things, but for the most part, I do. And my thinking would be, because I believe the statistic's probably true, but my thinking would probably be is there's probably in that of writers, that's probably more 90%. Think so. That way. Yeah.
I just write when I said earlier, transcribing on a good day, I literally hear it. Sure. Not like schizophrenia, but I assume you do. The words just kind of take care of themselves, and they come out in full sentences. But I think I only found that out a year ago or less, that was not universal.
Yeah. I wonder if there's, and I wonder if some of it is learned or not, right? Like there's always that, nature versus nurture kind of stuff. But I wonder, like with more and more people that grow up with like TV and like now kids with devices and things, so where you watch things versus reading, like, when you grew up in a time where you read a lot more when you were younger and things, that if part of that language, that the thinking in language versus not is partially because earlier on you're exposed to different forms of thinking more often.
Do your kids, do you think, have verbal abilities that are kind of off the charts?
Well, I mean, my kids talk a lot.
Coherently?
So I don't know. I would have to. I'm curious. I'm gonna have to ask them like what if they do or not.
Yeah, because people, I've asked a number of people now, and they look at me like I'm insane, but they don't think in words. They have no idea what I'm talking about. Right. And I say, listen to yourself. Think. Don't you think in words? Aren't you always describing what you're seeing? Thinking. No, you always. Just, I mean, even falling asleep. See, tonight this will ruin your sleep. But as you go to sleep, see if you're thinking. Listen to yourself. I want to know. So you'll have to.
Well, I'm a long time insomniac, so I know I do. My mind will be racing. So unless I have a few drinks, then I can kind of that typically kind of dulls me enough down to kind of like fall asleep. But otherwise, I'm just like, I'm awake. And do this and read my book or whatever.
For a long reason, I had multiple sclerosis, and sometimes it affects cognitive ability as well as physical other things. And I was having some memory issues, so I went to Mayo because we live an hour and a half away from Rochester, Minnesota, and they did a incredibly extensive neuropsych workup, like 4 hours of testing. And when the results came in, we were sitting with the doctor who was coordinating the whole thing, and I could hear him say, well, what do you mean that's unusual? He turned to me and he said, this guy's telling me, the psychiatrist who was analyzing the results, she's in the 99th percentile verbally, in the 4th percentile mathematically or quantitatively. How's that even possible? Well, she is a writer. It's like, okay, so I really am very lopsided, but way overdeveloped verbally. And I would love to know, like I said, if other writers have the same kind of, I mean, like Ken Liu, who you had on your show recently, and I've read, he's brilliant, and in lots of different, he seems to be able to control a lot intellectually. He's very deep. Mm-hmm. Not me. I don't control anything intellectually. I have my abilities, and then there's the rest of me. But I'm very lopsided, and I would love to know whether most writers are. What would you say your answer is? Are you lopsided? Are you mathematical?
No, I don't think I'm that lopsided. I'm not mathematical, but I've never was like bad at it. Competent at it. I think if I worked at it, I could be good, not great or anything. But I when I needed it for work, I could do it, and I could analyze things, all of that just fine. But I think with me the difference is there's I think where I'm lopsided, if there's a place there's a real lopsided, isn't necessarily like language versus mathematics. It's creativity versus structure. It's that, like I said, I have so many ideas, like I can spiral out of control. And then whatever the converse of that is where like keeping things, like remembering, like I have the calendar and things I learned to mitigate that, but I don't like time flies away from me like nothing, I'll forget anything that's not. Then my wife puts the kids' birthdays and stuff in the calendar, because otherwise I would just, not that I don't think of them. It's just that I don't connect that. Oh, it's 8. Like yesterday was my grandson's birthday. My grandson Juju's birthday was 8/28, right? And I know that as I say it. But when I wake up yesterday, I see 8/28. That means nothing to me. That's just the day, as the number on the screen,
Right.
So I think that's probably, if I have a lopsidedness, it's probably in that respect that I want to create so much new that the current structure or current existence is nebulous, more nebulous to me than most people. But
do you put structure together when you write? I mean, do you have a deliberate come to Jesus meeting with yourself when you start a story or a book or whatever, and lay out the structure, all the kind of interesting.
Yeah, no.
So
the way you described it, actually, I write a lot, pretty similarly. Like there will be I just have this idea for this dialogue down the road or this or that, and I just kind of go write that. I think that characters making decisions form plots, right? Like characters doing things, right? They make a decision, they do something, or they don't make a decision, whatever it might be. But and then everything just forms from there. So I lots of times have no idea even what the ending is going to be. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I have the idea for the ending more than the beginning, and sometimes I kind of know what the broad strokes are going to be. The book I said I started on is actually based on a short story in the collection I put up behind me, where Big Slut is. So the collection would usually be there's a short story called Tea, which is a kind of a weird story. It was a 12,000 word short story, a little long on the end for a short story, but 12,000, something like that. It was up there. I wrote that and then distilled that down. The story that was published was about 1,000 words.
Wow.
Yeah. And so it completely went. So the next book is actually based on that short story. Right. That's the first chapter of it. And then there's all that kind of comes after it, the story, which is nothing like that 12,000 words. So it was this and it's going off in this completely, third way. I have no idea where that's going. I know swaths of where it's going. There's some narrative things I want to play with. There's a narrative ideas I'm kind of playing with it. And I know that I kind of know what the main characters are with it. And I've been getting real far. I've drafted, I think I'm on 4 or 5 chapters and a bunch of those little middles that we were talking about.
Yeah.
So I kind of know that, but where that ends up, I know a few big moments down the line. How I'm ending that, and no clue. Yeah.
That's comforting.
Yeah. There's always someone out there. I know. Say that to someone else. I said that on an open bar one time. I like to write this little part, and I saw a few of the looks from the panel. I was like, "What is this guy talking about?" You guys insane, But you got it. I think that's the thing. It's got to work for you. You got to find your muses. Whatever they are, however you speak to them, you figure it out. So I have a fun part of the show that I think we need to get to, shots. So you don't have to do shots, but they're rapid fire questions.
I do have somewhere. Yep, I have something to drink. Hold on.
Oh, very good.
It's not alcoholic, but it'll do. Okay.
Very good. Okay. So rapid fire questions here. Nothing nothing difficult, but one of the things we didn't mention, because like I said, I like to kind of keep the show organic, but I do know that. Let me go up so I can reference the book. Okay. It was Hannah. Yes, Hannah's Dream.
Yep.
Was the book, and then that was when you were the press secretary for Killer Whale, Kiko, which was the orca that was the star of the movie Free Willy.
Willy.
Very good. Which was my, my. I don't even know what to think with my show introductions. I just whatever comes to my mind. I ramble out there, but I remembered Free Willy, so I went with it. So in honor of Free Willy, that debuted in 1993, I have some 1993 questions for you.
God. Okay. 93. How old was I? All right, go ahead.
Okay, so. We'll start with number 1 here. So what was the top song according to the Billboard charts?
In 93?
93.
No idea. I have absolutely no idea.
You want a hint?
Yeah, I pass.
Oh, pass. Okay. It was, I Will Always Love You by Whitney Houston was the number one song that
Wouldn't have even gotten close to that.
I
Next.
only know because of the Google box, you know. I do remember that. I remember it was exactly in '93. It's not it. So another one. This was a pretty big movie, and also featured big creatures. What was the number one movie that year, according to IMDb?
Big creatures. Oh man. It probably wasn't the Golden Compass, but I'm thinking polar bears, and that's the only one I can think of.
So think creatures, maybe not animals. I'm using creatures.
Creatures. They're big creatures.
Large,
You're hitting me on all my
land-based
weakness.
creatures. It's
Could be
Jurassic
Star
Park.
Wars? Oh, dinosaurs. Okay, Jurassic Park. Yeah. That would
Yeah.
have come to mind either.
Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
And then, so on this show, a group of high schoolers hung out at the Max and dealt with real life problems by reminiscing sometimes about, watching ET. Can you name the show? I wake up in the morning. It's the longest all morning. I don't think we'll ever make it on time. Saved by the Bell.
Oh, never watched it. I didn't watch it. I'm not. Okay, go ahead. Keep going.
It's okay. It's okay. There's a score at the end, but don't worry about that. Don't worry about the story now.
The goose eggs.
All right. So last question, 1993 related. So when my junior high crush, Janelle, last name withheld to protect people, called me in the summer before high school, she did so because A, she secretly also had a crush on me. B, I was the boy of her dreams. Or C, she just wasn't into you, loser. Give it all up. After all these years, you're married, for Christ's sakes.
Hey, so that's what I'm trying to do.
Thank you. I'll never know. I'll never know. Awesome. So back to normal shots, the normal programming here.
Okay.
Do you have a bucket list? And if so, what's on it?
Oh, I'm beginning to feel, I don't feel old, but I'm beginning to feel older. And so I've been thinking about bucket lists, and I would very much like to do, though I don't want to go on a cruise like the big Carnival cruises, but those long boats up one of the European rivers. I really would like to do that. And another bucket list item, I want to go back to Scotland, which I adore. And so those are two things. A fourth dog, that's my bucket list, and we're picking her up on Tuesday. So,
very good. Congratulations.
Yeah, I don't know that I have anything else specific except that we've sort of done one of the big bucket list things, which was to leave the city and move to a place we can afford on a river or on water. And we've achieved it. Panic, but that was probably the biggest single ambition anyway, bucket list item. Then there are probably our little ones that I'm not thinking of right now, but well, I'd like to write one more good book. I mean, a good book that I'm very proud of, and it could take me the rest of my mental life anyway, since I have Alzheimer's in the family. I figure I've got about 10 years of good brain left. So I've got one more good book in me, I think. Well, hopefully more, but
right. Yeah. Well, hopefully more. I hope you get that one done.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, very good. But it's good. I mean, you got to, it's funny. I think of it. I don't have an actual list, but you kind of, I think, have a list, in your head with certain things. So, and it's funny when I ask that to people, so much ends up being about travel.
Yeah.
It's like so much. It's like, I want to go to this place, kind of experience this thing. No one's ever said like, I really want to make sure I own one more house. Not like, not even a car, right? Sometimes people have a certain car and it's more like a nostalgia run, right? Like I want a 76 Corvette or something, but barely any of that. It's almost always like I want to go experience this place or do this.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It's more experiential. I care less about the things that I have. More and more, I'm not all that well organized. And so the more things I have, the more disorganized I just don't have to deal with I'm not that material anyway, and any material ambitions I had really have to do with the house we live in, and this one's peculiar, but it's fine. Right. So I think it's the experiences in the end that are going to be my bucket list things, rather than I want a great car or I want a big diamond ring or any of the more really truly material things.
Sure. Amen. Have you ever witnessed anything inexplicable?
Oh, yes, I have. And it has to do with Scotland. And it happened with me, not to me, but my husband found a battlefield in Scotland, and a specific part of it, the Battle of Culloden, was held in 1746, I believe. Anyway, he died there. He, for other reasons, just was at this place and realized that he knew that place and he had been killed in the battle there. And my husband is a good, wonderful man with a poor imagination. He's a very literal man. And that he would come up with this is so unlikely. And then he proceeded to describe for me what was there then, like that stand of trees wasn't there then. Yeah. That's where the horses were coming from, and this is what I'm hearing, and this is how it went down, and here's where I was cleaved with a sword, and I died right here. I mean, at that rock, and totally. I have none of that in my makeup. I have no extra sensory anything. I mean, nothing has ever happened to me that would indicate that there's a bigger world out there that we can't see or affect. That was very inexplicable, but I do believe it. 100% believe that it was real. Just because I can't explain it makes it no less real. So that was a big one.
Right. Yeah. Amen. I think it's funny. My son, we used to watch the show called Adam Ruins Everything. And it was this comedian, Adam Conover, I think is his last name, if I remember right. And he was just talking about things. They did one on death. And my son was, I want to say 7. And he starts off, the show starts off very bleak. Like, oh, he's just, you black out, it's black, and da-da-da. That's the show about death. It really upset him. All the other episodes he watched, no problem. We used to really like the show. He would look forward to kind of watching it. And so... But I think partially because we're not religious, we don't take him to church and things. So it's just like he's learning about death, and it's just this bleak, like everything just ends and that's it. Yeah. Right. And maybe that's what happens, maybe not though. And so part of the, things I told him is you don't realize like there's so much to existence we don't know about. Right. Mm-hmm. Like I forget who said it, but they said a physicist will tell you there's no God as long as you grant them one miracle. Big Bang is a miracle, right? And then it's like, oh, there's the dark matter in this. And like 90% of the universe is the thing we call dark matter. That just means you don't know what it is. My dad is actually was an aerospace engineer. He has his degree in physics and things. I've talked with him about this, these things over the years. And I'm like, one of the most compelling things to me is actually when you hear these reincarnation, kind of tales, right? And the people that happens, they go somewhere. Like really vivid memories, and their stories, and they track people down that were alive at the time, and they'll talk to them, and it's wild, but I believe it completely.
When I said my husband said, that stand of trees wasn't there. When we came home, I looked into the battlefield, and that stand of trees wasn't there. They were planted 80 years later. How would he know that?
Right.
And all these other things that, so my mom, died a month ago, and I have no idea where she went. I mean, if she went, but I don't think it's the end. I don't know what happens afterward, whether we're all reincarnated. I don't know who knows, but it's a great mystery, and I find it less frightening because of stories like Nolan's, where clearly, at least for some people, it doesn't end here, Sure. And
I think it's way more, to use the word magical again, I think it's way more magical than we think. And I don't think it's one thing happens. I think 1,000 different things could potentially happen, and I don't think. I think most of them are just more amazing than we would ever think. I think we're just on that we have these little experience we want to reference everything to, but that's so tiny compared to the universe. So
yeah. And I'm not religious either. I mean, I'm Jewish by heritage. I'm an heirloom Jew, but I don't practice. I'm not. My family didn't. I mean, I have no faith whatsoever. And so the idea of being wide open to any possibility, I find a gift. I don't find that I miss faith. I mean, I've never felt in need of it, even in hard times. But the likelihood that there's great stuff still to come, even if it's not me as I know me, I'll experience it. I hope I do. And what a wonderful thing. So that's very exciting.
Amen. So where was I with my list? Where is your happy place?
Oh, my happy place is definitely out over the water these days with my dogs and with my husband. We have such a good life. I mean, it's so full of satisfaction and joy right now. I can hardly stand it. So everything around me, I mean, I didn't like my career. I worked full time almost all my life and doing things I was good at, but I sure didn't like it. And I didn't feel fulfilled. And it was such a relief not to have to do that anymore. So my happy place is kind of all around me. How goofy is that, though? But it really is.
I like it, bro.
I don't have to be ambitious anymore. I don't have to wonder who I need to become. I am, and I'm dwindling. So I have been what I'm probably my fullest self, and now I'm shrinking. And so, my standards are lower, not for my work, not for myself, but I don't have the expectations of perfection the way I used to. And it's very liberating. It cuts everybody so much more slack. I find judgment is boring. People are interesting. So if you listen without judgment, all kinds of great stuff comes your way to think about and hear about and ask people about. And so I guess that's my kind of goofy answer to my happy place. It's now. It's right now.
Very good. No, I love that answer. It's a beautiful one. So, and the final question, the question I like to end every episode of every segment of Shots with is favorite podcast, and why is it Writers Drinking Whiskey?
Oh, well, because I like you, and because you're like Dario. Our mutual friend Dario Chiviello is a wonderful man, and he's introduced the two of us, and I'm very grateful for that. And I don't do podcasts. To me, it's still a kind of a new format. So I'm very pleased to be with you on yours. And Rachel Maddow, I'm a great fan of hers. So I would have to say those are my two. I'm not a listener. I'd rather read. So
sure.
My listening, as you can see from my musical ignorance, it's just that's not part of my normal day.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And I'll include the link. Actually, I'll probably, after you said his name, I'll put it up here. Okay. So future me, put up Dario link here.
Yeah.
Dario is one of the patron saints of the show. I have two patron saints of the show. It was Dario and TD Johnston, who was the first guest, who just has like the Rolodex of writers. I mean, he was just so helpful, especially early on, just getting people I could talk to that were really, really interesting. And then promoting this show, he's Eric LaSalle on, they share an agent. And he was like, I just asked my agent, do you think she want to go on? No, go on those podcasts. I met his agent before. It's like, oh, I think he would be into that. So those are the two patron saints of the show. So hopefully more to come, but so awesome. So thanks for that. So I usually mention it on the emails. I forgot to mention it with our pregame here, but did you have something you could read for us today?
I think I'm going to pass on that. It's not a favorite thing of mine to read out. I'm not that good at it. So if you don't mind, I'm going to excuse myself from that. But I would like to tell you about, and the book isn't published. It may never be published. So I'm not promoting this one, but it's a curious book that I just finished. And if you don't mind, I'll just tell you a little about it because it's so different.
Sure.
It's called Buckle. And it's set in 1862 in Buckle, New Mexico, which is a real piece of shit town in the middle of nothing. I mean, New Mexico, there's nothing going on. And blacks are a slave. A black woman has just been dragged west by her new owner, who is a corrupt preacher. And he gets as far as Buckle, New Mexico, where there's nothing but a saloon, kind of an abbreviated hotel, and a brothel and a general store and very little else. And this preacher who has owned her and abused her loses her in a card game. And so the book opens with her being told that she's basically been given away and he's leaving. The corrupt preacher's taking her horse and the wagon and he's going away and she is not. And so she's stuck as the only black person in this town. I think there were 12 in the whole state at that time. It wasn't a state, it was a territory. Anyway, so that's my what if for that book is what happens if you, a young black woman, have been ripped away from family, child, husband, because you've been sold off and you have followed this abusive man across the country on foot to this God knows where and then dumped. And she makes her way into this town and has very interesting relationships with the madam and an 11-year-old war in training and some of the other prostitutes. And it becomes a story of coping when you're so far out of any of your elements and coming up with a personal strength to manage it. But it took me, I don't know, I've been writing it for probably 8 years, and I was about a third of the way through, and I realized I'm writing a Western. I don't even read Westerns. I think I'm writing a Western. And it was so much fun to just completely depart from the modern world, from anything I've ever written about, from anything I know from personal experience. I'm not black. I'm not enslaved. I'm not living in 1862. But,
right, sure.
But, it's just been an experience that I wouldn't trade for the world just because it is so profoundly different. And it kind of shows, I think, for me anyway, it demonstrates love of writing because this book, because I am not black, I'm sure I would be accused of cultural appropriation and all the political correct things. I hope I created her respectfully. I certainly intended to, but it'll be a tough sell. And I don't know its commercial value. It may not have a lot. I think it does just because it's such a crazy story, but it's my biggest challenge. And so that's what I'm looking for an agent for. And I'm not found one yet. I've found people who love the book, but they aren't necessarily convinced they can sell it to a publisher. So that's where my current passion is. Those are the characters I miss the most.
Right.
I don't know if I'll write a sequel or not. I can begin a sequel to it, but I don't know how I'll end it. And every book I've ever finished writing, I've known the ending. Not the middle, but I've known the ending. And so until I know the ending of this one, if it has an ending, if it will be a sequel, I'm stuck.
Right.
So we'll see. But I'm very proud of that book. It's a book that only I could have written just because it's so odd.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens to it. I don't know. And I'm okay if it languishes. I've had my successes. I'm comfortable with all of that. And like I said, sometimes you get a chance to, I wouldn't say lower my standards in this case. My standards are probably higher than normal, but I've done enough now that I can get away with just seeing what happens and not worrying so much about, am I a good writer? Will I ever get published? And is this going to ever happen to me again? Like the second book you got published, which is terrible. experience because you don't want to be that one hit wonder if you had a hit to begin with.
Sure.
And so, but all of that for me, again, because of my age, and I've been lucky enough with those 5 books to get them out, I kind of did it. I would like to do it again. It's not that I'm not ambitious, but we'll see. And if it's not going to ever get out to the public, I think I can live with that. So
sure,
that's
well,
the
I love the notion of moonshots, right? Like there's like I love like the I think every writer has a bit of a stage. I think mine was probably abbreviated. I don't know that working on Pirates all this long at this stage of my career was the right thing to do. It might have. It definitely wasn't the prudent thing to do, but taking those moonshots and like I just have this is a passion. I really want to go out and do this thing, and I didn't realize it was Western when I was writing it. Right, it was just this passion, this thing I was passionate about, and going out and doing it. I think those are the most rewarding to write, but I also think they have the most potential. I think Hollywood really struggles with this because it's just, let me throw out sequel after sequel after prequel after. I hear there's now new words for when it's in between, like the 1 and the 2. It's medquel, like whatever, like nonsense, like going on. But I think that's the best. So I salute you. I think that sounds amazing. And there's, I'm from the school that like I think one of the real beauties of writing is that whole like old saying of walking like a mile in someone else's footsteps, right? I think as a writer, that's kind of what you're trying to do. The race part is less than the character part, and less of the human part, and it's trying to step in other characters' shoes and doing it. Is illuminating and can illuminate other aspects of experience. No one today in America can write an authentic slave experience because I think everyone's that passed away, right? It's just it's time has passed. So I think the PC is actually a way. And I always felt this in corporate. I was the least corporate. I had so much success in corporate, I think partially because I was not corporate. And people trusted me because I just talked to them like a human all the time, including up and below. Like I talk to everyone normally. And that it's a detriment. Like you have to way more connects us than divides us. Race is the silliest. We get so into these, silly identities. But if we had another writer on here that was, a Mexican writer, because we're all writers and we probably all think in language like we were talking about earlier, we probably have way more like connection than like what might be, if we had, another Mexican, another Jewish person, another white guy out there that were non-writers. The 3 of us would probably see things, understand the word more similarly and understand where we're coming from more than those other ones. Yeah,
I agree. And the magic of character-driven books is that if you get your character right, they don't represent the world. They represent that specific character with those specific traits. And that's why I think I can pull it off. I don't know what it's like to be a slave, and I don't know what it's like to be one of the slave experience, I have no idea, but I know how my character would have handled it. Right. And she's that real and that vivid to me. And so if you can be specific, you're not writing about a culture. You're not, it's one story, and hopefully it's a compelling and interesting story, but it's not, I'm not trying to capture a culture. I'm not trying to take over history. It's just my little character and how she interacted in a difficult situation. She happened to be Black and she happened to be enslaved, but very much herself. And it's that self. If I drew the self well enough, you'll believe the rest, you'll buy it. You won't worry about whether it's accurate or not. But again, we'll see. I mean, but I wouldn't have missed it for the world. And taking a risk is exciting always. And, one of the benefits about being an older writer and having been doing this for so long is that you're no longer imitative. Early, my writing, certainly when I was writing for the New Yorker and trying desperately to be published there, was very imitative. It was good, but it was very imitative. Well, the days is gone. I mean, I have my own voice. I have my own ways of writing and tricks and habits and things like that.
Right.
But it means that with age and relative success comes confidence that you can depart. Just try it. If you fail, you lose time. That's all. And because words are free, our raw materials are nothing. So a lifetime of experience, that's our raw material. So I love that.
Amen. Awesome. Well, thank you for that. So I like to say on the show, it's last call. You don't have to go, but you'll have to restart the video. So, and I'll end this with our kind of normal question here. So for anyone watching, what's one thing that you would tell them? Maybe this small, big, I think small sometimes is just as good as big. What's one, piece of advice that you would tell them that can make their life just a little bit better?
For a writer or for any person?
Any person.
Any person. Ask questions. Take an interest in the people you interact with and ask them questions and enjoy the stories you'll get, because they will give you stories if you let them. They will invest that in you. If you are truly a good listener, and the world will open up to you. And
absolutely,
there's all kinds of magic in that.
Yeah, amen. Thank you for that. Yeah, no, it's funny is I don't think the episode's aired yet, but there is a episode with Emmanuel. Why am I blanking? I think it's Rose. I'll correct it with a little thing somewhere around the bottom if I get that wrong. But I was telling him my son had his first crush, last year. He's 7th grade. That's probably why I did the little thing about my crush in 8th grade. The year matched up. That's probably why it popped in my head. And he was, I don't know how to talk to her, because he didn't have any classes with her, right? He saw her in summer school and sees her after. And I was like, look, the way you talk with anyone, ask them about themselves.
There you go. That's exactly right.
They know more about that subject than anyone. You know less about that subject, so you're going to have lots of questions to ask, and then it becomes a very natural conversation. You ask them, you can relate, and then you just talk. It's not magic. You just ask, take an interest in someone else. That's and you'll find that's actually very rewarding for you too, right? It sounds like when you just think of it like that, I'm manipulating, no, it's just a way to kind of make a connection with someone. It's just okay. I'm going to ask you about you. I'm going to learn. And if you get something from that, they get something from that, and then it's easy.
One of the things that stuns me is how few questions people ask each other. Why don't we do more of that? Are we not interested? Are we not being brought up to? Because I don't know anybody who doesn't enjoy talking about themselves. And total strangers.
Right.
I mean, it's true. What do we spend our time thinking about? Us and what it means and all of those other things. And why we don't take a greater interest in the people we interact with. I don't understand. I never really have figured out why that's not more compelling, but it's a wonderful way to learn the world around you. It's just ask lots of questions and say thank you. That's the other thing. I was stuck in an airport for, I think, an 8-hour layover, and I was really bummed about it because I should have been somewhere and I wasn't going to make it in time. And I decided, all right, I'm going to turn this around, and I'm going to ask every employee that I see how they are today and say thank you for what they did for me, including the bathroom attendants, the people who have to clean the restrooms in airports. Is there a less forgiving job in the world? I don't think so.
Sure, probably not.
Young woman was, doing the usual paper towel dispenser thing or whatever. And I said, did people ever say thank you? And she said, stared at me. She said, no. I said, well, I will say thank you. Thank you for what you're doing. It makes it easier for me. And I did that to everybody I could interact with. And it was really fun. And they were always stunned that anybody thought to ask, how's your day going? What time did you start this morning? Is it a long commute? Do you like what you do? Have you had the start for, it's so easy. And you get these wonderful relationships going, even if they're very brief. You connected with somebody and that mattered to them and it mattered to me.
Yeah.
So it's a useful trick.
Right. Amen. Amen. Awesome. Well, thank you for that. So if people do want to learn more, I know you don't have the website anymore, but if they want to learn more about you or find your books, what's the best place to direct them?
Probably Amazon or Goodreads, because all of my books are there. I am on Facebook, but it typically is about my dogs. I don't talk a lot about my writing, but if you're curious about my dogs or my river, find me on Facebook.
Very good. Awesome. So well, too. So, and thanks again. It was a real, pleasure. I'm glad it ended up working today, too. So that was really nice. It was nice to get to chat with you and, and spend this time. So thanks so much for coming on.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure in every way.
Extra shot. Question for the audience. What is your favorite book featuring an animal that is not a dog? The dog, it's just too simple. I didn't mix it up for you. Let us know down in the comments section. As always, thanks so much for tuning in. And if you want to support the show, as always, thanks so much for tuning in. And if you want to support the show, again, the best way is always to, support the authors on here. So if you want to support me or would like to support our guests, that really is the best way. I'll leave links down in the pinned comment if you would like to pick one of those up and check them out. We would appreciate it and appreciate you. And if you appreciate the show and you want other forms of, listening to it, perhaps on the go, we are available as a podcast now. So iTunes, Spotify, wherever, Amazon Music. Apparently people download us from there. Wherever you would like to find it, we're probably there. And if we're not, let me know and I correct this travesty. And if you do like our open bar content, we are now on the Mean Green operating machine over there on Rumble. So I do put the open bars on there early, pretty much once they're edited. So if you would like a little perk to go on there and follow us as well, it's there. If not, it'll be here at your normal viewing hour. Thanks again, everyone, and cheers.